what does it mean to be a woman? That question feels more relevant today than ever before, right? Well, over 70 years ago, one book tackled that very question with so much force that it literally sparked a revolution. Today, we're going to unpack Simone de Beauvoir's massive 1949 work, The Second Sex, a book that completely changed the way we think about gender, power, and what it means to be free. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? What is a woman? But that one single, profound question, well, that's the launchpad for a philosophical bombshell that is still shaping our world today. And the person asking that question was the French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir. Back in 1949, she published The Second Sex, not just to get a simple definition, but to really dig in and understand why, throughout all of human history, women have been so consistently oppressed and their freedoms so limited. So, let's get into why this question was so revolutionary. See, Beauvoir wasn't just asking for a biology lesson. She was putting society itself under a microscope to see how it manufactures the very idea of womanhood. And this brings us right to the book's core argument, its big idea. Beauvoir says that what we think of as gender, what's masculine or feminine, it isn't some natural biological destiny. Nope. She argues it's a social construct, something built piece by piece over centuries by our culture and our history. This idea that gender is built, not born, leads right to her central diagnosis of the problem. Beauvoir points to this fundamental power dynamic that has defined society for as long as we can remember, the idea of man as the self and woman as the other. Now, this is such a powerful concept because it exposes a hidden structure in how we think. What Beauvoir is arguing is that society has set up man as the default human being. He's the norm, the absolute, the standard. And woman, by contrast, is defined as the secondary, the relative, always in relation to him. And the consequence of this othering is just huge. It basically denies women their own full independent humanity. They're not just seen as individuals in their own right. Instead, they're defined by their relationship to men, as somebody's wife or mother or daughter, but not just as themselves. Okay, so if woman isn't a natural state you're just born into, how does one get there? This brings us to probably the most famous and powerful concept in the entire book, the idea of becoming a woman. And there it is. That's probably the most iconic line in all of feminist thought. What Beauvoir does here is just brilliant. She draws a clear line between biological sex and socially constructed gender. You might be born female, she says, but you learn how to be a woman based on the rulebook society gives you. And this process of becoming starts really, really early. From childhood, girls are conditioned, they're guided toward a very specific set of traits. They're taught to be gentle, to be emotional, to be dependent. And they're surrounded by these cultural myths of eternal femininity that just reinforce these really limited roles. And this isn't random, it's not an accident. Beauvoir identifies this whole system as patriarchy, a structure of male dominance that uses every major institution we have, family, religion, education, to keep this blueprint for womanhood locked firmly in place. All right, so if society builds this cage, how do you break out of it? That leads us to Beauvoir's solution. And it's deeply rooted in her philosophy of existentialism, which is this idea that we are all radically free and it's up to us to create our own purpose in a world that doesn't hand one to us. So for Beauvoir, an existentialist through and through, liberation has to be an active process. It means women have to consciously reject the roles that society forces on them. They have to assert their own identities. And, maybe most importantly, they have to create their own meaning and purpose in life, totally free from what anyone else says they should be. But this isn't just the thought experiment. This isn't just in your head. Beauvoir was crystal clear that economic independence is the absolute foundation for all of it. If a woman doesn't have her own access to work, her own income, her own property, she's forced to depend on men. And that makes true liberation pretty much impossible. So, what happened when these explosive ideas were unleashed on the world? Well, that brings us to our last section, the incredible, lasting legacy of a book that's often been called the Bible of modern feminism. The book's impact was immediate, and it just kept growing. I mean, it caused a massive controversy right when it was released. But by the 1960s and 70s, it had become a core text for the second wave feminist movement, inspiring millions of people. And today, it's still essential, foundational reading in gender studies and political science.
One of its most powerful legacies was helping to cement this idea that the personal is political. What Beauvoir did was show how the individual, private experiences of women, in marriage, at home, even in their own heads, weren't just personal problems. They were directly connected to these huge structural political inequalities.
Of course, any book this big is going to have its critics, and it did. People have pointed out that the book really focuses on the experiences of educated Western women, and that its very philosophical ideas can sometimes feel a little theoretical. But even these criticisms are part of its legacy, right? They sparked new conversations that are still going on today. But in the end, the message of the second sex is a powerful, timeless call for individual freedom. It's this profound reminder that the journey to equality really begins when every single person, no matter their gender, has the power to answer the question of who they are, for themselves,